When I was in the equivalent of middle school today, myself and my classmates spent hours and hours and hours diagramming sentences. You do it at your desk, or if you were unlucky, you were called to the board, and then you'd have to draw that line and take the words in the sentence and put them in their proper place. It was subject, verb, relative clauses, all those things. And it also helped us to learn the difference between active and passive voice. I don't know how it did it, but we did it somehow with the diagramming of the sentences. If the subject was the doer of the action, active voice. If the subject was the receiver of the action, passive voice. There'll be a quiz at the end of Mass to see if you've learned all that. Where's all this leading? Well, the gospel story today is about two men, the Pharisee and the tax collector. And in one sense, the Pharisee is all about the active voice, whereas the tax collector is passive voice. The Pharisee spoke his own I do this 5 times. I pay taxes. I do this. I don't do that. I. And I thank God I'm not like these other people, these sinners, even that tax collector over there. And then we hear about the tax collector who just won't even raise his eyes to heaven and speaks in the passive voice. Oh God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Jesus ends the story by saying, you know, the Pharisee was not justified, but the tax collector was. It's important to note that the actions of neither was condemned or praised. The Pharisee was probably doing all the good things he mentioned, that he was one who cared and looked out for and did his prayers and paid his taxes. And the tax collector probably was a no good. He was one who cooperated with the enemy, and he cheated people to make more money. It's not about what they did, it's really about how they prayed, their attitude really in the presence of God. In prayer, you and I need to recognize our dependency on God. This grace that is given to us, not because of what we've done, not because of our active voice, but because we stand before God in a passive voice. We want and need to receive. Henry Nouwen was a popular spiritual writer in the last century, and one of his first books was called With Open Hands. And he used that image of standing before God with open hands, with nothing in them. He said that God should be able to take whatever God wants or to give whatever God gives. That's not easy. A few weeks ago, in speaking about prayer, I mentioned St. Ignatius of Loyola and his prayer, the Suscipe, where Loyola said, we ought to pray, take, Lord, receive all my liberty, my understanding, my entire will, and give me only your love and your grace. They are enough for me. We should not think of prayer as standing before God with a list of all my wants, my needs, the things that I think should be done. It really is a willingness to stand humbly before God and say, I need your mercy. Just give me your love and your grace, and that's enough. A rabbi once said that if a person finds himself, after a period of prayer, being proud or self-satisfied in what he or she did, that person hasn't prayed to God, but to himself. Maybe this week we should try to think in terms of passive voice when it comes to prayer. We are indeed the recipients of God's love, not because we have done something like the Pharisee, but we are asking for God's love and mercy.